Welcome, everyone. My name is Ashley Hopkins-Benton. I'm a senior historian and curator of social history here at the New York State Museum. And I am very grateful and excited for the fact that one of the collections that I get to work with closely is our Shaker collection, which is a really world-class, extensive collection. It includes everything from the finished goods that the Shakers are so well known and loved for, things like chairs and baskets and boxes, but also the tools that were used for making them, items that were part of everyday life in the communities, and even raw materials and things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to collect long term. And the basis of this talk today is to really focus on the Shaker women who are the reason that we have these collections in the first place. They were really, really important in making sure that these materials were preserved, in working closely with the director and curators at the State Museum, as well as our colleagues in the New York State Library. And without their work, these collections would not exist, and a lot of these stories would have been lost. So our story, well, I first wanted to start with a quote from the 2000 catalog for the exhibition, A Shaker Legacy. And I will say the New York State Museum does a major Shaker exhibition every 20 to 30 years. So we have a number of histories to look back at the way that this was interpreted. But in this catalog, it starts, the Shaker collection at the New York State Museum was the inspiration of museum director Charles C. Adams, his friend and associate, photographer William F. Winter, and the Shakers themselves. This extraordinary partnership collected, documented, preserved the Shaker way of life long before Shaker scholarship and collecting became fashionable. This publication is dedicated to those pioneers who made the Shaker legacy possible. And I think it's great that they point out that the Shakers themselves, the women in the community, were a part of this. But I think their role in it was really a lot more important than just saying it was the inspiration of Charles Adams. So by the late 19th century, Shaker communities were diminishing. In 1892, Groveland in Livingston County closed. The Shaker community in Philadelphia closed around the same time. And a lot of the remaining Shakers at those communities came to Watervliet. Other things were starting to shut down and really withdraw at the same time. And in 1912, the New York State Library began working with the Shakers and purchasing materials from the Watervliet community. Shortly thereafter, the New York State Museum formed a partnership with the Shakers, which lasted over 15 years. And from the beginning, their focus really was holistic. They wanted to document the community in situ through photography, through conversations with the Shakers about their history, the use of the objects, and then, of course, collecting the objects themselves. The Shakers, for their part, donated a lot of materials, especially the industrial items, but as Shaker collecting became more and more popular, they also realized that it was important for their survival to sell some of those items. So as we go through, we'll see things that were both donated and sold by the Shakers to the New York State Museum. So this is a shot from an early New York State Museum exhibition. The Community Industries of the Shakers ran from June 17, 1930 to July 1st, 1932. It was a collaboration with Edward and Faith Andrews, who were prominent Shaker collectors, William F. Winter, the photographer who I mentioned earlier, and Sister Alice Smith, one of the last Shakers living at Watervliet. And this was really a groundbreaking exhibition in that it got a lot of people excited about this history and starting to think about it as well. To the right, you can see Eldress Anna Case. She was another one of the last Shaker women who was living at Watervliet. As we go through, I'll have little bits and pieces that are gleaned from the census records because they really tell us a lot about some of these women and where they lived and how their lives changed within Shaker communities, more than you might expect. But Eldress Anna Case started her life in Rochester, New York. She ran away from home at age 11. Her mother had died and her father was likely an alcoholic. And when she ran away, another relative managed to get her to the Shakers, where she very quickly found community. She arrived on March 18th, 1866. In 1881, she was already given a leadership role. She was assigned to assist Eldress Rosetta Hendrickson, and by the 1905 census, she was identified as Eldress. By 1912, she was the lead Eldress in the community, and by 1915, she was a trustee. I'll also note, in addition to all of these leadership roles, in the 1910 census, she's listed as the manager of the sewing room. So through all of these, we see a lot of women having religious roles, having roles in the industry, having roles in supervision. With her death on July 18th, 1938, the 3 remaining Watervliet Shakers moved to Mount Lebanon. And at that point, even more materials started to come to the New York State Museum, including furniture that was made at Groveland, which had closed earlier, and those materials were shipped to Watervliet. Eldress Anna Case saw a lot of this coming. She had already developed a relationship with the museum earlier, as first the West family closed in 1916, then the North family, and then the school shut down. So she saw these things were starting to build. This community was not going to be much longer. This is Sister Jennie Wells. She is one of my favorites in the collection because she really worked very closely with the curators and brought a lot of materials. And she also has a really interesting story as the Shaker communities were shutting down, in that she lived at Groveland, then she moved to Watervliet when it closed, then she moved to Mount Lebanon when it closed, and then she moved to Hancock. So she saw the closure of 3 different communities. She was born on February 4th, 1878 in Buffalo, New York, and she was responsible for 7 gifts and 3 different sales of materials. And by 7 gifts and 3 sales, I mean hundreds of items in each one, between 1927 and 1941. One of her main focuses was weaving. In the 1930 census, when she's already at Watervliet, she's age 52, and her occupation is listed as a weaver of carpets. I believe that this is the rug that you see here, and this is one that she wove specifically for the museum and gave to us for the collection. She also donated 2 different looms, a tape loom and a jack loom. And the jack loom is interesting because it was made at Mount Lebanon very early in Shaker history. Then it was sent to Groveland, where she probably met this loom. And then it came with her to Watervliet and then Mount Lebanon. I'm sorry, Watervliet and then the museum. She really exemplified the idea of raw materials to tools to finished products. So here is a spool of wire used in the broom making industry, and then a broom, both of which she donated. And some examples related to bonnet making, the palm leaves that are woven to make the bonnets, the mold that was used for shaping them, and then pressing tools that were used to make the creases and kind of shape the material. The pressing tools in particular, I think, are really interesting because we talk about Shaker craftsmanship so much when we talk about the furniture and how simply beautiful and well made it is. But that goes all the way down to their tools. These are amazing pieces, so solid to feel in your hand, so comfortable, ergonomic, you could even say. And of course, without her work, we wouldn't know all of that. By the 1940 census, Jennie Wells is at Mount Lebanon. She was 62, and she was listed as doing housework at the Darrow School. The Darrow School is a private school that was located on the grounds of the Mount Lebanon Shaker community. This is Eldress Ella Winship, who lived at Groveland, then Watervliet, and then Mount Lebanon. She joined Groveland relatively early. She first shows up on the 1875 census at 17 years old. And then her sister Caroline is also there by the age of 20. When she was in Watervliet, she was a school teacher. And then, as I said, by 1930, she is at Mount Lebanon. She's responsible for 1 gift in 1919, which we will see momentarily. And then we have Eldress Rosetta Stevens. She lived her whole life at Mount Lebanon, or her whole life as a shaker in Mount Lebanon. She was born in England. She was actually thanked in the 1936 edition of the Pegboard, which was the Darrow School yearbook. And I think it's really telling that she was interested in this preserving of history as well. She brought to them a copy of a letter from Leo Tolstoy to Elder Frederick Evans and wanted them to see how important this was, this correspondence with this famous person in the outside world. So they thanked her for her work on that. And this is a sewing kit that she donated to the museum. This is part of an accession that is, just to give you a sample of what some of these gifts look like, quote, a large collection of Shaker artifacts, including baskets, sieves, fabric yardage, casting patterns, and boxes. So I mentioned Eldress Ella Winship's one donation, an early one in 1919. This is an electrotherapy machine from 1822. The Shakers in the very early years did not go to the outside world for medical care. Later on, when various things happened in the communities, eventually they did have to, but they were encouraged to study medicine, to learn about what was going on, to experiment and to try new things. So an electrostatic machine for curing various ailments is a really interesting and great example of that. This is Eldress Emma Neal and Eldress sister Sadie Neal. They were actual sisters and then both joined the Shakers together. Eldress, and they both lived their whole Shaker life at Mount Lebanon. Eldress Emma Neal, by the 1920 census, excuse me, at age 72 was listed as a farm operator. And then in the 1930 census at age 82 is listed as the dairy farm manager. So that's the other thing I love about these records is how long and deep these women's relationship was with the working community in these Shaker communities. Her sister, Sadie Neal, was listed first as a cloak maker in 1900 at age 51. And then by 1920, she is the postmaster for the Mount Lebanon community. And she is there, both of them are there into their 90s. Both gave multiple gifts and a couple sales between 1930 and 1940. And their conversations with the students at the Darrow School also really worked to preserve the history of Mount Lebanon. They had a large feature in that same 1936 edition of the Pegboard yearbook, from which this photo comes. This is a weasel that was donated by Emma Neal. In addition to her farm work, she was also pretty involved in the textile producing in the community. This is used for winding thread after it's been spun, prior to using on a loom or for knitting. And this is a comb that's also used in the fiber production process, donated by Sister Sadie Neal. These are two hangers. The bottom one is from the Neal sisters, and it came as part of a gift with baskets, sieves, and other domestic artifacts, but also a large collection of posters and placards that related to the Shakers' industries and the way that they sold materials to the outside world. The one marked MW is actually from Hancock Shaker Village. It comes from Sister Alice Smith, and was part of, quote, a large collection of Shaker artifacts, including textiles, household artifacts, and textile working artifacts. This is Sister Sarah Collins. She's the only, or one of only two that I'll talk about today who didn't directly donate materials to the collection. She spent her life in the Shaker world at Mount Lebanon. Her earliest known record is from 1865. She appears there at age 9. Her family is from New England. By 1880, at the age of 25, she's listed as an Eldress. So she has already gotten a leadership role there. In 1910, at age 55, she's a laborer in the chair factory. And by 1930, at age 74, she's an agent selling chairs. So she was really interested in this chair production. And back to the Darrow School yearbook, there's a quote that says, chair making was one of the earliest of the Shaker industries. Dr. Andrews quotes from the daybook of Joseph Bennett proving that chairs were sold at Mount Lebanon as early as 1789. The sale of chairs and some other articles of furniture was for a long time a flourishing business at the South family. The chair business did not continue for a very great time at the Church family, but at the South family it was kept up until quite recently. The last person to pursue chair making there was Sister Sarah Collins, who we see here. And though she did not donate materials from this industry, she did spend a lot of time with photographers, with curators, with historians, talking about the process and what it entailed, how it was done in her experience. Sister Lillian Barlow was a member of the second family at Mount Lebanon. She came all the way from Mississippi, and I haven't quite figured out how she got here, what brought her to the Shakers. But in 1910, she is a cloak maker, and then in 1954, she becomes a woodworker focused on chair making as well. So she was very involved with Sister Sarah Collins as well. Her materials really run the gamut of different kinds of things: finished furniture, a seed sieve in the middle, and a palm fan, one of the items that they're making for sale to the outside world. Mount Lebanon in particular was known for its shop, which sold fancy goods to the outside world. And a lot of these are kind of a slight twist on the things that Shakers made for life in their own communities, but that would appeal to others as well. And finally, and perhaps the strangest of the stories that we have, but one that I really enjoy, is that of Sister Frida Sipple. She lived at both Watervliet and Hancock. In 1920, she was at Watervliet. She's listed as 42 years old and born in Germany. And then by 1940, she's at Hancock. And she made one donation to the New York State Museum. It included a couple things similar to the other donations that we've seen, and then postcards, lots and lots of postcards. So it turns out that she was a collector of postcards, and her postcards run the gamut. We see things like this one, which is from her family in Connecticut, just everyday correspondence talking about her siblings, their children, what everybody's up to, just keeping in touch. And it's very clear that she had a regular letter writing correspondence with them as well. They picked really interesting postcards that came from the place that they lived in Connecticut. So they weren't traveling, but they were finding these really interesting postcards to send her for her collection. But there are others that her friends clearly sent just because they thought that she would find them interesting and that they would be a good addition to the collection. So this one on the right, some of the cutouts of the fabric actually have real fabric inset. So unfortunately, it didn't photograph well, but if you see this in person, there's this amazing shiny silk in various places that's highlighted. And this one comes with a note about, "I saw this and knew that you had to have it for your collection." If anyone else here is a fan of Six, the musical, I got very excited as I dug through the records just to get a sense of what these postcards were. And we have Anne of Cleves' house, which was sent to her by a friend that was traveling. And this one is perhaps the most entertaining. So this is a 4-part dachshund card. You would send the head one day and then each consecutive one another day till you had the whole dachshund. So what I like about these postcards, they're not as directly related to Shaker life as the other materials. They're not something that they were making in their communities. This kind of close ties to the outside world was really frowned upon earlier. But by this later generation, the Shaker women were really keeping in touch with their families, corresponding. And I love that it shows her sense of humor and the relationships that she was maintaining. And clearly, she loved postcards. All of her friends are writing about this collection that she had and how important it was to her. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Have you read all the postcards, and was there anything real? No.
I have not read all of them. There are almost 2,000 postcards in that collection.
I tried reading the one that was up and down.
Yeah, and of course, some people have great handwriting and it's easy to read, and then others you have to really study for a while. There were a couple that I pulled getting ready for this that it's like, I really want to know what this says, but I can't.
So I drive over the Berkshires to Pittsfield pretty often, and I pass the Darrow School on Route 20 on the right-hand side on the hill there. Was the shape, you mentioned the which, Mount Lebanon?
Mm-hmm.
No. Was that right there on that site?
Yeah. Yeah, many of the buildings that are used for the school were Shaker buildings.
And then as you continue down, you get to the Hancock Shaker. Is that the right?
That's
Am I
correct.
remembering
Yeah.
that right? Okay.
Yeah.
How active are these Shaker villages?
So Hancock Shaker Village is a museum, a really active museum with great programming, and they're doing a lot of amazing things. Their baby animal program is coming up very soon, so definitely would advise you to check them out. Most of the other extant communities are museums at this point, a lot of like living history sites. And then at Sabbath Day Lake in Maine, that is the last active Shaker Village. Yes.
Was there anything you found that you said, that made you say like, oh, I'm surprised, I didn't know the Shakers did this or made this or sold this?
Yeah, I feel like there are little things here and there that are like, oh, okay, this too, interesting. And I also, when I was getting ready for this, I was looking, we have some old video footage that was taken by the State Library. And I rewatched that, and seeing some of these later Shaker women and the materials that they were making, and watching them knitting, watching them crocheting, doing various things was really interesting. But yeah, there are definitely surprises here and there. Yes.
Ashley, does the Darrow School have archival records of the Shakers?
That is a very good question. I don't know. Yeah, I know there have been times where they have sold materials, but I know that was really focused on furniture. I don't know what happened in terms of papers.
Was the Darrow School begun by the Shakers, or was it separate?
No. And I need to study up on what the relationship was and how exactly it came about. But it is a private school. It was not formed by the Shakers. I'm guessing they leased out lands. That I know that happened at Watervliet as they were starting to shut down. They started to lease lands to other organizations. But I need to dig into that story more.
It's geographically, it's very close to the Hancock. Why would they have? Are they related in any way? The same families, or do you know?
So when we talk about families in the Shakers, for the most part, they're not biological families. They are just groupings of people that live together. And I don't know, well, I take that back. Watervliet is the first Shaker community that was found in the United States. And then Mount Lebanon and Hancock come shortly after that. So I think geographically they're closer because they were just starting to build up. It was a very early period and travel was harder, so it made sense that they pop up that way. And then later communities start to open a little bit further afield.
Did they just maybe outgrow the Mount Lebanon and open the Hancock maybe?
I don't know the specifics.
So I actually work at Hancock.
Thank you. Yay.
So no, it's basically just that was an area that was experienced a lot of religious foment before the Shakers even showed up, and so a ton of people from that area ended up converting to the Shaker belief, and basically communities formed where there were a bunch of neighbors who had all converted to the religion, and so those two communities formed at almost the same time. Mount Lebanon was organized and recognized by the Shaker leadership just a little bit before Hancock, but yeah, so they were both there, and at one time their properties met at the New York-Massachusetts border. And there were two Shaker communities, one in Shirley and one in Harvard, Massachusetts, with very geographically close to each other. It just happened that a lot of people around there converted, and so hey, all of these biological families have converted, why don't we make their homes our home?
And I will put in the plug for our colleagues at the Watervliet Shaker Heritage Society, at Hancock, at the Shaker Museum in Chatham, that this year is the 250th anniversary of Mother Ann Lee arriving in the United States, and they are all doing really great work on the early story of, you know, how these communities were started and really the beginning of the story. And I've been doing a lot of work at the very end of the story.
And I don't know if people are aware of the film that came out over the winter. That's a film called The Testament of Ann Lee. It's a kind of funky, arty, musical interpretation of the origins of the Shakers, and some of it was filmed in Hancock. And it's an interesting film. It's relatively accurate in the ways that we know, but yeah. So that's also gotten a lot of attention this year. So.
How many surviving members are there at 7th 808?
There's now 3. There were 2, and a new member joined last summer. That's right.
She's in process, so not officially Shaker.